Well, good evening, members, officers, visitors, and members of the public. I'm Councillor Tim Gibson. I just thought I'd repeat myself. So, thank you very much. As if my accent's not difficult enough already. Right, I think that's better. Good. Good evening, members, officers, visitors, and members of the public. I'm Councillor Tim Gibson, and I'll be chairing this evening's meeting. The meeting will be recorded and proceedings will be conducted in accordance with the Council's constitution, including procedural rules, which are available on the Council's website. Could I ask remote attendees to turn off their cameras unless they are speaking, and remind you that the instant messaging facility is to facilitate democratic services alerting me to a remote issue. Any member of the public abusing the instant messaging facility may be removed from the meeting. Could I also ask members and others present, please to turn off any electronic devices that they have that may well interfere with our meeting this evening. Thank you. Item 1 is the emergency evacuation procedure. There is no planned evacuation drill this evening, and accordingly, if the alarm sounds, it is to be treated as a genuine need to evacuate. There are emergency exits to my right, or through the passageway to my left as you leave the chamber, and then via the main staircase at the front of the building. Please note, lifts must not be used. The assembly point is on the far side of the car park, and it is important that you remain there and do not return to the building until I have announced it is safe to do so. If anyone present will need assistance in evacuating and negotiating the stairs, could you please inform me now so that we can make necessary arrangements to assist you? Thank you. The Council's constitution asserts that the meeting has a quasi-judicial role and determines the rights and obligations of the applicant. Members must consider each application and everything that is said in the meeting concerning the application and make their decision based solely on their planning judgment of the information available to them. Following a decision by members, delegated authority is given to the planning officer to issue the decision notice, and planning permission is not granted or refused until the issue of that decision notice. Any member of the council who is not a member of the planning committee may attend as a visiting member and may speak having given prior notification. Such visiting members may, of course, include ward members, and whilst visiting members can speak on an application, they are not permitted to vote. Any member acting as a substitute on the planning committee must have undertaken appropriate training before doing so, and members must remain in the meeting for the whole time that each item is being debated and should not vote on that item unless they have done so. I'd now like to welcome our public speakers and remind you that you have 3 minutes to speak, and an audible warning of time will be given when there are 30 seconds remaining. If the meeting is deferred to conduct a site meeting, you may speak both at this meeting and at the site meeting, but there will be no further opportunity to speak on the matter when it comes back to the planning committee. The meeting will follow the order set out in the agenda. However, I will amend the order if there's good reason for doing so, and in particular, I'll take any items first where a member of the public is registered to speak, before I move on to the remainder of the agenda, and I'll verbally reorder the agenda as appropriate. Item 2 on the agenda, apologies for absence and any substitutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have apologies for absence for Councillor Henderson, who's substituted by Councillor Thomas, Councillor Bonney, who's substituted by Councillor McCall, and Councillor Hall, who's substituted by Councillor Palmer.
Thank you. I think it's appropriate at this juncture that I mention that Councillor Henderson, unfortunately, isn't with us this evening and is substituted, and he's currently in hospital. And I'm sure that our best wishes from all the members of the committee, and in fact, all members of this council, send their best wishes to him. Thank you. Item 3 on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of March 2023, minute number 785 to 789. Councillor Jays.
Thank you, Chair. On item 2.2, it said a ward member spoke against. I believe I was the only visiting member to speak on this item, and I believe I maintained a neutral stance and spoke generally about the application, neither for and against. So can we amend that to say a ward member spoke and just get rid of the against, please?
Thank you. I'll be happy to do that, members. Yep. Okay. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for that clarification. Thank you. Item 4 is members' declarations of disclosable pecuniary interests. Councillor Thomas, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's in relation to item 2.3. I will be speaking as a visiting member, ward member on that item, and I've been advised I should leave the room once I've spoken. Thank you.
So, in fact, that is a non-pecuniary interest. Councillor Palmer, please.
One is the same non-pecuniary. It's on the divided out item 1. I spoke on this application when it first came to the committee, and I've made my points well known on this. So I feel that there's the predetermination factor on that, and I will speak as a ward member, but leave the room during the debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Palmer. Okay, members, we'll move on to item 5 then, which is the planning working group minutes. And this is to approve the minutes of the planning working group held on the 4th of April 2023 as a correct record. Those members that attended, is it your wish that I do so? Thank you very much indeed. The application itself to which these minutes apply will be considered at a future meeting. So we now move on to item 6, which is to consider the deferred item, which is 20/505046 full, and it's High Ups, Poot Lane, Upchurch. And I'll thank the officer, please, for an outline and any updates. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me. So members will be aware that this is a deferred item. So you'll be mindful of this presentation from previous planning committee on the 10th of November last year. The site is located within the village of Upchurch, outside of the built-up area boundary in the countryside location. The site area identified in red, the adjacent area identified in blue is within the same site ownership and is the location of the swimming pool and the associated diving business, which is discussed within the committee report in front of you. Next, we have a number of photographs, first showing the site and the site entrance. We have the site itself, which is later grass. And then the following photos show the site's proximity to the scheduled monument, which is listed as a World War II heavy anti-aircraft gun site. Turning to the proposal, the block plan shows 2 detached units with the existing entrance retained and large area of landscaping around the boundaries of the site. The application was revised through the course of the application to show it originally came in as 2 detached buildings, but it was changed during the course of the application to remove one of the bedrooms on the ground floor and to change it from a 2-bedroom into a 1-bedroom units. The design is contemporary with a pitched roof and has been in close consultation with our design and consultation team, given the proximity to the heritage sites to the rear. As you're aware, this is a deferred item to allow it was a deferred item from the November Planning Committee to allow the applicant to provide supporting information in accordance with policy DM3 in the rural economy. The additional information was provided. They provided a business plan and design and access statement. The council has reviewed the additional information and feels that the supporting information does not address the original concerns that were set out in the committee report. And for this reason, we still recommend refusal of the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Gary Rosewell, please, to speak on this item?
Rose White, Church Parish Council. Church Parish Council has fully supported this application, has done since it was first raised back in 2020. It's a very sympathetic plan. It will not have any negative harm or impact on the area. Proposal for 2 holiday homes has the support of the Parish Council, and this is seen as an opportunity to increase tourism in the area excuse me, and help sustain local businesses. The location particularly suits bird watchers and with its close proximity to the Medway Estuary and for walkers and cyclists along the Swale Coastal Path. The location is ideal for the countryside lovers of bird watchers and near the Medway Estuary. Local area, the village pub, the village shop, the post office and the co-op, as well as the local takeaway. As far as I am aware, there have been no objections from any of the local people towards this application. Upchurch Parish Council fully supports this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Mr. Stephen Curtis, please, to speak on this item?
In the committee meeting in November, I have provided a business plan to support the need for my holiday lets to be built next to my house, which is adjoining to my swimming pool. I provided the evidence there is demand for holiday accommodation in the area, which you will find in our design and access statement appendices, figure 1 and 2. We have considered existing buildings in the area. We've had no success, which again you will see in the design and access statement, page 5. The diving school is a business that would work with the support of the income from the holiday lets, which I will fund and build. Figures are illustrated in our business plan. The business plan is based on a 1-bedroom accommodation at first floor, the latest plan to overcome the flood risk. The holiday lets will help local shops, pubs, fishing lake, riding school, all within 1,500 metres. The application case officer, Rebecca Corrigan and Rob Bailey, favoured the new glass-fronted design, which reflected the landscape. All of our conditions that were put forward, such as flood risk reports, ecology reports, and heritage reports, have all been addressed and approved by Natural England. The reports cost me thousands and were all done on the guidance of the planning officer, and we have evidence of this in emails with my agent, Woodstock Associates. Evidence of subsequential test has been provided in our design and access statement, where our business is relying upon the adjacent pool at High Hopes, appendices, figure 3. My property sits in flood zone 3. I've lived there for 20 years with no problems. We sit 4.7 metres above sea level, and the holiday lets have been designed with first floor sleeping accommodation. This is supported by the Environmental Agency. We will pay the SAMS mitigation if the application is agreed and before the decision is issued. I've already paid Natural England over £1,000 in reports. Last year, the case officer told us that all conditions have been addressed and was looking to put the application on a manager's desk to get it approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Councillor Richard Palmer to speak as a ward member, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's 3 reasons been given at 6.1 of the report for refusal. Now, number 1, we often are recommended to approve 20, 40, 100 houses of development on best and most versatile farmland, but whoa, 2 holiday homes need to be refused to protect best and most versatile farmland. This is a small hamlet and often people visit this area for the peace and tranquility, plus the lovely views in the area. Holiday homes are already sited in Poot Lane. Many people now wish for a vacation at home in Blighty and in remote locations. Should we be denying this opportunity to people, particularly when this administration has been trying to open up the visitor economy within Swale and to have more walking and cycling routes? Reason 2 for refusal, the lack of the SAMS payment. Well, no approval is issued until such time the payments move. So you can cross that one out, you can cross number 1 out, so that leaves number 3. This reason, while I fully understand the officer's logic, however, this committee can stray from policy for good reason. This is land owned by the landowners, as the applicant explained. The dwelling house will be near where the holiday homes are going to be built, and that would be an option, because if you had a holiday home business, you would like to be on site to be able to take care of maintenance and other things. So it makes a logical case to be there. In the report, it mentions a case in Sheerness. It is mentioned, however, the circumstances are different, as that was for a permanent homes, and each case should be judged on its own merits. We are often informed. I feel the facts that these are holiday homes make a big difference to the Sheerness case. Paragraph 164, the MPF sustainability benefits the community in increasing rural economy outweigh the flood risks. And I feel this application is best approved and should be approved tonight so the gentleman can get on and run his business. There are many business plans that, the council said the business plan wasn't sufficient. There are many excellent business plans that fail. There's very more poor quality business plans that succeed. So business plans are only as good as the paper they're written on. And I give little weight to business plans. It's someone's passion and the opportunity in the right place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Could I now invite Ward Member Councillor Alan Horton to speak on this item, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members. This application has been on the portal for 896 days, and during that time, not one resident has objected to it. I'll very briefly summarise the consultee responses. Support, no objection, no objection. Drainage strategy required. SAMS payment required. Meets the objectives of the visitor economy strategy. Proposed design is acceptable. No objection, no objection, no objection. That's 3, 4, 2 you can deal with by condition, and 5 that show no objection. Based on those, I conclude the impact of this development is very low and either has been or can be properly mitigated. I know Poot Lane very well. Whilst it is a rural lane, it is often busy. It is a circular route in a quite well developed area with an assortment of houses interspersed between stables, agriculture and poultry farm buildings and a nursery. I wish to highlight a couple of those. Bayford Farm, Poot Lane, was approved 13 years ago for holiday lets, and Greylag Farm, Poot Lane, was approved less than 3 months ago. It was a barn conversion to a holiday let and took just 57 days to improve. I accept neither are quite the same set of circumstances, but both show that holiday lets are acceptable and beneficial to our community. Section 84 of the NPPF, supporting a prosperous rural economy, states planning policies and decisions should enable the sustainable growth and expansion of all types of business in rural areas, both through conversion of existing buildings and well-designed new buildings. Section 2085 clarifies this further. It says planning policies and decisions should recognise that sites to meet local business and community needs in rural area may have to be found adjacent to or beyond existing settlements. And it makes the point that sites that are physically well related to existing settlements should be encouraged where suitable opportunities exist. This application is an NPPF compliant opportunity for a rural business development that will bring financial benefit to our community. Finally, I think it's perfectly reasonable when preparing a business plan to test your ideas. So to me, trying the diving lessons makes sense. And I can imagine the situation where trying to prove an idea is valid, coming up against comments like, you haven't tried it. Mr. Curtis has tried it and it worked. I think the route to the right decision is to conclude that the very low impact of this development is significantly outweighed by the benefit to the local community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair, and would like to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Jones.
I thank the officer for her report. Policy has been followed in writing this report. However, we have made exceptions in the past, and this may be one of those cases. I don't want to repeat what Councillor Halton said, but obviously we've got both ward members supporting, parish council supporting, destination and place manager supporting, design conservation unacceptable, and no objections from the public. So I think I may be going against the officer on this one. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. I would like to see this approved. I think it is something that's good in the countryside, and having this sort of business and giving support would be a good thing. But I do think from what we have seen, there's too many issues that are still unresolved or more information. I can understand what has been said about having buildings in the countryside, and we have housing put in, but then we get something like this, which we think that is benefiting local people and should be approved. But within reason for refusal 1, it says that the application fails to demonstrate a clear and overriding need for the development in the location that's outweighing the harm. And that's the problem I've got with it. That hasn't been done. More work has been done with the business case that's come forward, and that is good. But if officers have reviewed all of that and still saying that it still fails to demonstrate a clear need for it and is recommending refusal, then I think they have got that right. The flood risk, the flood assessment and what needs to be done, again, that is something that has been done at appeal and gives a clear reason. I think we do need to be inconsistent. If there is more that then can be done, then we should be doing some more tests. This one hasn't done it. It may be that more work can be done, and it is doing it. But at this stage, I think the officers have got the right recommendation. I have got a concern that within there as well, it does say about no records can be found for planning permission being granted for the business, and that's another concern, that if there is still questions hanging over that as well, and we're saying that this is good for the business and we can have holiday lets there as well, but we're not sure actually what could happen in that instance, that is causing problems for the applicant even more if we start doing that and not having a link. So I think it's probably something that maybe could happen at some point, but with the information we've got for us tonight, I think the officers have got the right recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I was going to mention 4.4 as well, really in the form of a question. I do have a concern that we may be approving these holiday lets for business that actually, according to the report here, may not have had planning permission in the first place. So I don't know if the officers can maybe answer me on that one. On the flood issues, flood zone 3, we've had a number of applications in Sheerness, and that particular one, where the bottom has been reserved, so there's no bedroom or anything, or no residential on the bottom, and they are going to do that, which I totally approve. But what I do pick up is that the business plan is based on two-bedroom guest properties, not one bedroom. So again, that doesn't link up unless we've had a business plan since then. It's based on the two, not the one. So I'd like an answer if that's advanced in any way. At the moment, I think I tend to agree with Councillor Hunt that there are a number of questions that at the moment, I'll listen to more debate, but that lead me to believe that it shouldn't be approved at this stage.
Thank you. I'll hand over to our officer, please. Would you like to comment? Ms. Corrigan, thank you.
Hello, thank you. Yes, to answer your question regarding the existing business, scuba diving business, there is no records of a business at that location. And there is concern from the council that because we have got no records of it and we would introduce a further element to the site, then we don't know really the existing intensified use of that in terms of coming and goings, cars, people visiting the sites, and how much that would be even further impacted if we were to allow further development within this countryside location. So at the moment, yeah, we have no control over the existing and none over the potential impact either. And then just to answer your second question about the number of bedrooms, yes, quite rightly, the application itself, when it was first submitted, it came in as 2-bedroom units, and it was revised under the course of the application to remove one of the bedrooms on the ground floor to address the environmental agency's concerns about flood risk in the area. So we were left with 1 bedroom on top, but the supporting business plan that has been provided does give a projection and a trajectory on 2-bedroom units. And interestingly, they have said that there is a lot of emphasis put on the fact that there are no small. They've put a lot of emphasis in the business plan that there aren't a lot of developments such as this for 2-bedroom properties that would accommodate larger families visiting the area, whereas they are only 1-bedrooms that they've already said in the business plan that there's a lot of already. So it's a little bit contradictory.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as short as I can on this one anyway. The proposal to me is a business that encourages the appreciation of rural areas and their economy. And I'm looking at it as an entrepreneur. He's taken his own risk, and the business plan is part of his own risk. And it's up to him whether he makes a go of it or doesn't make a go of it. We've all been down this road and made these decisions, some good, some bad. And asking him to look for other sites he doesn't own to see if they're better, I think I don't understand how you can try to make somebody do that. That does force me down. And as for its threats to everything, this is a very low volume usage in the area. You're talking 2 or 3 visitors. There's not any need for any major numbers. So I can't see any reason to object to it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring our legal officer in at this stage, if I may.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to address the point about the flood risk and the sequential test and the need to look at alternative sites. I did think this might come up this evening because it's a new matter that's come up as part of the deferred item. So I've got the NPPF extract with me. So I'm going to read from that if the committee will allow me to. It states the aim of the sequential test, which is the first stage, is to steer new development to areas with the lowest risk of flooding from any source. Development should not be allocated or permitted if there are reasonably available sites appropriate for the proposed development in areas with a lower risk of flooding. And it's clear that that doesn't just mean sites in the applicant's ownership, that is any sites that the applicant could take a lease on or take control of in the future. So that's stage 1, that's the sequential test. And the sequential approach should be used in areas known to be at risk now or in the future from any form of flooding. So that's very clear. Stage 1, you look at, are there any other sites available? And they don't have to be within your ownership. And the report in the summary of reasons for refusal says that that information hasn't been provided. So that's why that's there as a reason for refusal. The NPPF then goes on to the second stage, which is the exception test, and states if it's not possible for development to be located in areas with a lower risk of flooding, in other words, you've looked at the sequential test, there are no other suitable sites, you then go to the exception test. And effectively, the exception test has to demonstrate that the development would provide wider sustainability benefits to the community that outweigh the flood risk. that the development will be safe for its lifetime, taking account of the vulnerability of its users without increasing flood risk elsewhere, and where possible will reduce flood risk overall. So those are points the committee have come to. They're looking at the benefits of the tourism, the fact that it is just proposing accommodation on the first floor. So those are all valid points, but they're part of the second stage of the test. And what the officer is saying is the first stage hasn't been properly addressed yet to allow us to move to that second stage. So hopefully that just clarifies how that flood testing has to be undertaken. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Members, I don't see anyone else indicating. So I'll take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer's recommendation for refusal? Those against? And abstentions? Okay, so that's 7 for, 6 against and 2 abstentions. So the recommendation for refusal is valid, subject to the issue of the decision notice. Thank you, members. Councillor Winkles, please.
I'd just like to give my apologies. There was an nasty crash on the A2. It took me from 5:30 this evening to get past 6 Mile to Albaga traffic, hence why I'm late arriving. My apologies for that. That's why I'm late. Thank you.
Duly noted. Thank you. Could we invite Councillor Palmer back in, please? Okay, members, thank you. So item 2.1 has been removed from this evening's agenda. So we move straight on to item 2.2, which is 22/505535 full. This one is Owens Court Cottage, Owens Court Lane, Selling, Kent. I thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, everyone. There's no update to the report for this one, so I'll just take you through the proposal, which is for a single-storey rear extension to this property. To give you a brief outline of the site, here it is, the red line around it. I'll zoom in to explain this a bit further. So here's the property here with the mark on it. The extension is going. Can you see my cursor? Yeah. The extension is going essentially in the place where an existing outbuilding is located. There's a neighbouring property, the only really neighbouring property that's affected, which is situated here, which is a Grade 2 listed property. This is not a separate residential unit. This is an outbuilding related to the listed building. There's a bit closer in, which essentially shows the overlay of where the existing outbuilding is with the proposal superimposed upon that, so you can see the difference there in the footprint. So this is taken from the side of the property, and this is the outbuilding which I've been referring to, which will be removed, and in its place will be the extension. And here's just some further photographs which show that from various angles. Here's you can just see here the roof of the listed building I was referring to, and this is the boundary wall which separates the two properties.
again, this is just taken from the other side of where those photos were shown. And these photos are taken from the private amenity space of the listed building. So you can see the eaves line of the existing outbuilding is essentially in line with the garden wall, obviously with the pitch and going away from the boundary. This is taken further towards the adjacent dwelling, and this one is taken from inside the adjacent dwelling. And I'll zoom in on that one. This is from the first floor, and here's the outbuilding that will be removed, so that gives a sort of good impression of where that will go. Where the replacement extension will go, and sort of the distance involved, the fact there's a intervening hedge and there's a tree on the boundary as well. To take you through the precise details. Again, here's the existing situation, the outbuilding located here, and here's the wall that I've been referring to. This is taken from both sides, giving those aspects, and then that's essentially from the neighbouring private amenity space, which is shown there, obviously without the wall, to give an idea of the height. So moving on to the proposed. So here's the location of the single-storey extension. Here we can see the slope of the roof essentially, with the eaves sitting a little above the wall, but then sloping away. When the application was originally submitted, the roof essentially went the opposite direction, and officers liaised with the agent to amend that to reduce any impact on the neighbouring private amenity space. And here's to complete it, those two views from the other aspect. And again, this is here we are. This is where we're looking from the neighbouring garden, but without the wall. Yeah, and that completes it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Could I now invite Parish Councillor Andrew Bowles, please, to speak on this item?
Right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members, for allowing me to speak on this. I suspect the vast majority of you know me, but those who don't, I'm Councillor Andrew Bowles. I'm currently the Vice Chairman of Selling Parish Council, and I've lived in that parish for the last 12 years and in the adjoining parish since I was born in the 1950s. So I've known this site the whole of my life. I'm speaking on behalf of the Parish Council, who voted unanimously to ask you to refuse this application, both in its original form and in its revised form. I'd like to pay credit to officers for the work they've already done in trying to make this application more acceptable. It's certainly not as bad as it was. And can I stress that neither the Parish Council nor the adjoining occupier are totally opposed to development here. We just don't think the development as currently in front of you is suitably ready for approval. I must admit, having known that site for my whole life, when I looked at the application first, because I always look at the weekly planning list, my view was I couldn't see a problem with it. It was only when I was invited and went and looked on site that I sort of threw my hands up in horror and said, there is no way we can approve this. Councillor Valentine, who is one of the ward members, will obviously speak for himself in a moment. But can I say that when I first approached him, his reaction was the same as mine. When he went and looked and had a proper look himself, his reaction was to call it in. And certainly as far as the parish council is concerned, when we first discussed it informally before it was a formal agenda item, nobody could see a problem. By the time it got to the agenda, 3 members of the parish council had been looked. All of them were totally opposed to the application, and the parish council voted 7-0 to ask you to refuse, and has done so again when it's come back to us after the amendments. I believe, quite sincerely, that if it's granted as it is, it will have an immensely detrimental impact on the adjacent listed building in the AONB and on the ability of the occupants of that building, both current and future, to enjoy the quality of life that they've been used to and have every right to expect. Apart from the fact that the building does loom over the wall, in fact, looms over the garden patio, the biggest concern is the fact that the glass corridor, probably not the correct planning terms, that link this living accommodation with the adjacent living accommodation is right in line with the main bedroom window of the listed building and will flood it with light anytime the lights are on. And I cannot believe that the corridor linking 2 living rooms is going not to be lit at night and in the evening. It will make the enjoyment of the neighbours totally detrimental. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. And I move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jays. Anybody wish to comment? Councillor Valentine, please.
Thank you, Chair. So this is one in my ward, and as Councillor Bowles mentioned, I have visited the site on a couple of occasions. I mean, obviously it's a very special area, I think, there. The adjoining house, Well House, is one of a number of listed buildings on that site. And I think their origins go back to the 15th century. It's part of Saffrey Farm and a farm development. And so I think it is really a unique site. And although the applicant's home is not itself listed, it's very close to Well House. And I would have hoped to have seen a plan for an extension to come forward, which is something that was more sort of traditional. What they have is something that's very different, with a lot of glazing and this sloping roof. I do think officers have done a good job of liaising with the applicant and have gone some way to mitigating the adverse impact of the original plan. The high part of the roof now is no longer adjacent to the wall of the listed building, and it's got a green roof on it. So I guess that will help it disappear into the landscape. I share the point that Councillor Bowles makes about the lighting of the glass-linked building. So yeah, I support what they've said.
Thank you. Councillor Dender, please.
Thank you, Chair. I got a bit confused. I looked on the portal at this one and still a bit confused on the orientation. I mean, if you can maybe put the plan back on, would be helpful. Maybe the diagram, sorry.
Yeah, the issue here is that I can see why you're confused. Because that's not the house. That's the outbuilding. The house is off the page.
Okay. Yeah.
This way. So if I show you, I know it's a bit further out, but this one. Here's the closest dwelling to the site.
Yeah.
And this area here is where the proposal is.
Okay. Am I right in? So that's the whole outbuilding there.
This is an outbuilding.
I mean, both those blocks shown there. Against the red line, sorry, where it says Owens Court Cottage.
Yeah, Owens Court Cottage. Yeah, so that's the existing outbuilding which is on the site.
Okay.
Which will be.
Probably what confused me.
Yeah.
So the wall it was talking about, I thought was facing the garden of the other property, but I understand.
The wall effectively runs along where the red line is.
Yeah.
The northern part of that red line.
And the extension is that little gap there.
Well, this is
would be.
Yeah, that's the existing,
Yeah.
but it will go essentially in that same.
Which is why the link
Yeah.
faces the bedroom window.
Well,
or well house facing that way.
I mean, the link sits in between.
Yeah.
The extension
I
and
couldn't
the
understand
house.
how the link faces the bedroom window, but I can see from there now.
If I bring up the side elevation, I think that will be the clearest. Yeah, I mean the glaze link is there.
And that's facing, we're looking at it from Well House now.
From that direction, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the glaze link is less than a metre wide. And as the report says, it's 23 metres away from the property.
Yeah.
And I don't see why it'd be lit by anything other than standard domestic lighting, which, you know, is generally acceptable in terms of the impact it has on neighbouring amenity.
The height of the peak of the sloping roof, yes.
Yep, hopefully it's in here.
How does that compare with the height of the outbuilding previously, the peak of the outbuilding previously?
So highest point is 3.77 metres.
Yeah.
That'll be here, obviously. Whether I had that info, convinced I do. I've got the drawing of it. Which is there.
Yeah, that peak's there.
Yeah.
I was wondering how those compared. Because my thought is that it may not be any higher or minimally higher than the peak that was already on the outbuilding.
Yeah, I think, well, what we can do, if we want to carry on the discussion, we can get the figure.
Okay, that'd be great. Yeah.
But yeah, obviously the roof slopes in a similar fashion as the existing, but then it's monopitch, so it continues away rather than reaches a pitch. Yeah. Yeah, we'll find that info.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Winkless, please.
Thank you, Chair. Can the officer, in my usual fashion, I ask these questions, put a picture of the building as it is? Again, you did shut the first time. I missed out. I just want to see it again.
Yes. It's this one here.
Yeah. Explain again exactly where the proposed alteration is going to be.
Yeah, effectively in the same location, but with a link to the dwelling. So it'll be on. I mean, not exactly the same footprint, but broadly the same footprint as where that outbuilding is now.
Okay, I just wanted to have a look at it.
I'll show that. Actually, I've got the overlay somewhere. So, a little bit faint on here. Can you see the dashed line?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's the existing outbuilding.
Right.
So if I just move the cursor around it, so you can potentially see it. Yeah, there.
Right, okay. Okay, thanks for that.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
Got an answer.
Chair, and I had similar questions at Councillor Dendra, just understanding the height difference. And I think from that photo, I can see that. Obviously, I think this proposal is slightly higher, but the way that it slopes sort of higher up to the house and away from the wall, I think is probably going to be acceptable. And I think that with the cladding that they've got on that wall, and the fact that it's a sedum roof with green moss, I think it says on the drawings, I can't see that we can say that would be unacceptable. I think there's been a lot of work gone into it to think about how that was gonna work. With the glazed link, I can sort of understand the concerns, because when you look at it, when we saw the drawing of the outline of the other property as well, it is looking straight at it. But I also noticed that if, for instance, that was taken away, you've still got glass on the garden room, which could have light in it, and the property is still going to be looking at that. Even if that room wasn't there at all, the dining room has still got a window that's facing that property where you could have lights in it, or you could have lighting outside in the garden on that area anyway. That's probably even more so than if it was the glazed that's been proposed. So I don't think there's any way that we can turn it down on those two items, and especially with the distance between the properties. I think it was 23 metres. So I think what has been done to make it as good as it can be has been done.
Thank you. Mr. Gregory, can you come back to us?
Yeah, I've got a response to the query about the height. The pitch of the existing outbuilding is 2.92 metres, and then in comparison, the lowest eaves of the proposed is 2.64, and then it increases to 3.77. So it's in between those two figures. So it's probably roughly the same at that point.
I could come back, Chair.
Yes, yeah.
Having answered that. The only other question I've got is the link. What is the roofing? Is that glazed as well? It's a glazed roof.
Yeah, it's frameless glazed link. So yeah.
Okay. I agree with Councillor Hunt here that I find it difficult to find any material planning considerations that we could refuse it on. I'm a little worried about the glazed roof because that obviously will shine up towards the bedroom, but it's very narrow, so I don't know if it'd be enough to raise an objection on that.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I think the design of it's rather poor, actually, because I think that the existing building with a pitch roof blends in nicely with the existing house, and I think that it would be far better actually if it had a pitch roof rather than a sort of bat wing that looks a bit like an unfortunate carport stuck on the side of a nice dwelling. So I think it should be refused on design grounds, and that is a material consideration. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Davey, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just going by that drawing there, the frameless link is 0.98 of a metre long, in effect, not wide. Is that correct? That's what was confused originally in the documentation.
No, which is width of 0.98 metres.
Yeah, okay, so that's the distance there, and it's frameless. So as Councillor Dendra pointed out, there'll be the actual roof of the glazed link is clear.
That's correct, yes.
So they'd be unlikely to be hanging lights within that in the first place. That would be my guess, because there's nothing to fix it really. So the light on that short distance there would be the spill from either of the two rooms. I'd a guess.
Possibly. I'm not an electrician.
No. I mean, you could probably fit some sort of LED downlight if you wanted to, which would still mitigate the spill. But I don't see the light consideration to be an issue. Perhaps Councillor Simmons' objection on the design is more appropriate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Gregory.
I was just going to say we've got Simon Algar on the call. Obviously, it's within the setting of a listed building, and that the design consideration is important and has been taken into account. But I thought it might be worth Simon just coming in with a couple of comments in terms of why we've considered this design acceptable in this location, which I do agree is sensitive.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Chair. Yes, this one has been quite an interesting proposal. I mean, I think when I first saw it, I did have some concerns about it, but when you start to look at the actual materiality of the scheme and how it sort of basically addresses the boundary, it does seem as though it's it's a reasonable scheme. I can see where members are coming from in terms of saying, well, perhaps a more traditional design would have been more appropriate. But if you look at the photographs of the building, they have some contemporary elements to them in terms of the types of window openings already there, which is obviously being picked up in the design of the proposed replacement building. I think probably the sort of starkest change is the actual roof form, going from a traditional kind of dual pitched roof to a monopitched roof, and obviously the change in material from traditional clay tiles to a sedum roof. But I think my view on this is that it would, whilst it's wouldn't necessarily be the first choice in design terms, that doesn't make it unacceptable. You don't see it directly in relation to the listed building. You see it in relation to the subject property. As I said, it has similar materials to what's being proposed, similar forms of fenestration design. It's set back from the boundary. The roof has been changed so that it slopes away from the boundary, and as such, it was felt it would be quite a difficult one to refuse. There isn't really, there is obviously a change to the setting of to the listed building, but given that it's a building in the same location of a similar scale, albeit different elevational treatment, my view is that the effect would be a neutral one on the setting of the listed building, and as such, I don't think we've got any reasonable grounds to refuse this application. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Algar. Members, I don't see anybody else indicating on this one. So those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? Those against? And abstentions, please. I never was great at maths, members, but there's 17, so somebody's playing truant. So could we just do that again? So those in favour of the officer recommendation for approval? That's 11. Those against? And no abstentions. So that's 11 for, 6 against. So permission is granted subject to the issue of the decision notice. Thank you, members. We now move on to item 2.3. And this one, I do apologise. We've got a speaker on 3.1. So we're going to move on to 3.1. Apologies. So item 3.1 is 22/504165 full. And this one is Forge Farm, Herne Hill, Kent. And I'll thank you, officer, for an outline and any updates, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. There was a tabled update sent around for this one earlier today. But don't spend too much time looking at it because it's been superseded. So it essentially says that we recommend a further reason for refusal on the basis that the SAMS payment hasn't been received as the site's within 6 kilometres of the special protection area. But late this afternoon, we received the SAMS payment, so that's no longer a reason for refusal. And essentially, the reasons for refusal in the report are what we're continue to recommend. So there's no change to that now. In terms of the application, this is an application to convert an existing vacant agricultural building into a residential unit, and essentially increasing the roof height to allow for a second story, and the insertion of a rear dormer, and alterations to fenestration. So just to take you through the site, it's located, although there is some built form surrounding it, it's located in the designated countryside, and it's this site here, which has got the existing building outlined there, and the access onto Staple Street, which is existing and not proposed to be amended. This is essentially a closer up view of that previous drawing. To give you some context and what feeds into one of the reasons for refusal, the site I've marked there with the black cross, the brownish colour line is the boundary of the conservation area, and the red dashed buildings are listed buildings, and Forge Farm here is the closest listed building to the site. As you're aware from the previous item, Simon Alger is on the call, Council's Conservation Officer. So, if there are any queries relating to that impact and how we've reached our view, then I'm sure Simon will be able to expand upon that. I won't spend too much time on this one because this is the existing building, and this is the proposed floor plan, which essentially shows living and dining and kitchen area to the ground floor, and a bedroom in the first floor. Here's the existing elevations. It's a very simple design, a traditional agricultural building. The council's got a specific SPG relating to the conservation of these, which is one of the reasons why the application's been recommended for refusal. And here is the proposal. Yeah, the two aspects there being shown, and then the other two here, it's got this cat slide roof feature on the building. In terms of the site itself, this is the building here. As referenced in the report, if you can just see this here on the left of this picture, there is a housing scheme that's been approved adjacent to this site, but it was a rural exception site, so it met a very specific local need for housing, whereby there was limited options where that housing could go, which doesn't apply to this site, and which also feeds into one of the reasons for refusal, that it's in an unsustainable location. And here's some more views of the building. As you can see, it's a small scale, very, very simple building. And again, just from different angles. So yeah, as referenced, officers do not consider the application to be acceptable, and the three reasons for refusal, which are outlined in the report, are, as further to the update, are the three reasons why officers consider the application to be contrary to the local plan and the MPPF. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gregory. Could I now invite Professor Sam Gilbert, please, to speak on this item?
Okay, thank you for this opportunity. We want to restore this small agricultural building for our own residential use. The previous owner secured Class Q permitted development rights. This is our fallback position. Having spent our life savings on this charming derelict building, we definitely will use the fallback plans if we can't improve them. The Parish Council voted to support this application as an improvement on the fallback plans, but the planning officer notes concerns about extensive roof alterations and enlarged curtilage. The proposed curtilage is actually identical to the already approved plans. So whether or not this application is approved, it will not affect the curtilage or character of the land in any way. Our proposals maintain a similar half-hipped roof profile and, unlike the fallback plans, replace concrete tiles with traditional clay. We think that the height increase of 1.4 metres is modest and will be hard to discern visually, especially considering that the roof is going to be replaced anyway under the approved plans. We want to slightly increase the roof height because this allows for an increase of internal floor space from 26 square metres, far below minimum space standards, to 38 square metres. The council objects that the proposed dwelling would lead to cramped living conditions, but our plans increase floor space by 45% over the already approved scheme. If the problem is a lack of floor space, it does not make sense to reject these plans in favour of a fallback with far less space. The Council's concerns about traditional agricultural appearance draw on supplementary planning guidance titled The Conservation of Traditional Farm Buildings. This guidance states that it applies to buildings which are listed, lie within the setting of listed buildings, or are specialist buildings of quality and high architectural merit. None of these apply to this small derelict structure with a 1980s concrete roof, which is outside the conservation area and not visible from the listed farmhouse, which is 50 metres away. It is now within an infill plot of land. Our proposed scheme is highly sustainable, it meets passive house standards and improves biodiversity, whereas the fallback plans contain no ecological improvements. This attractive building is disused, derelict, and at risk of further decline. The proposals by award-winning architects offer the best opportunity to preserve it for future generations. They secure optimum viable use of a non-designated heritage asset, preserving the half-hipped form of the roof while maximising its floor area. This ensures an acceptable level of amenity in line with the local plan, safeguarding its long-term future. The fallback plans would be substandard due to the lack of space, and this was noted at the time by 8 letters of objection. Today's Class Q legislation would not permit these plans. We really hope that you can take this opportunity to improve on them as recommended by the Parish Council. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you very much. Now move the officer recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'll second, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jays. Members? Councillor Martin, please.
Comment. I know the area fairly well, funnily enough. It's quite close to the Three Horseshoes pub. I'll just double check with the officer if you could tell me exactly how far the entrance is from the Three Horseshoes pub and the associated bus stop, which I think I'm right in saying is directly at the exit of the access.
I'm not myself familiar with that establishment. As I mean, is it a sort of location in terms of facilities that you're?
Well, a pub and a bus stop do provide some level of facility. I would suggest that.
Yeah.
And given the nature of the rural pubs in this particular area tend to offer additional services as well, such as the ability to pick up a pint of milk and the like from normally an associated little ancillary shop facility, there would be provision for an element there, which I think is understandable. And given the proximity to the rural exception site that's already been put through, and the fact that actually there are a lot of chimney pots in that area, if you want to sustain the rural economy, you have to have chimney pots around your licensed premises. Having worked as a pub landlord for a fair few years, we all know what happens when you don't have new chimney pots around you. You suddenly find that your pub is at great risk. It's a fairly sympathetic design. The fallback position is pretty dire. Is this more or less harmful than that fallback position? And I think it is less harmful. So on this one, I would probably suggest the committee might want to consider going against the officer recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Valentine, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I know the site quite well, and I agree with some of the comments that the applicant made about the sort of character of the building at the moment with the concrete roof. I think I remember this coming to committee previously under the Code Q or whatever it's called, and we were told we weren't, when in a position to turn it down, that we had to give permission for it to be a residential dwelling. And I think the plans before us this evening, given that it's going to be a residential dwelling, improve that. So I'm quite sympathetic towards the proposal. I'm not sure that buses run down Staple Street anymore. I'm not aware of a route that goes that way, but maybe I should stand corrected if anyone else knows better. But can we have the site plan back up? It was up a moment ago. I think the fact that it's next to that rural exception site, I acknowledge the point the officer made of that implied in that name, that it is an exception site and wouldn't normally be developed. But the fact that those houses are there, I think it make it even sort of harder to see that this is really an encroachment on the open countryside, though I take that point. But in terms of sustainability, the road that runs off the bottom of the plan is Bull Lane. So I think you're about a mile there from Borton and the primary school and the shop. Arguably, it's within walking or cycling distance. So I think that's probably the aspect that would make it most sustainable. And indeed, that argument was used with the rural exception site when we discussed that. So I think I'm inclined to agree at the moment with Councillor Martin and suggest going against the officer's recommendation.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to ask for some clarification about the fallback permission, perhaps, and the roof height is going to be increased to allow for the mezzanine floor. What is the increase in height in the existing to the new height? Is it 1.6?
Yeah, so the ridge, paragraph 2.2 raised the ridge height from 5.4 to 6.8 metres. 1.4.
Yeah.
Apologies, you had a first question.
The first question is to do with reference to the fallback position. I didn't quite. I had a look at the planning history and couldn't see anything in there that said that there was a permission granted.
Yeah, so on the planning history, the second one down, reference 20/504753 PNQ CLA is a prior approval under Class Q of the GPDO, which allows for conversion of agricultural buildings to residential units. So that permission is, that prior approval is extant until January 2024. But what that doesn't allow you to do under Class Q is increase the size of the building at all. So in this case, officers have taken the view that obviously what's being proposed here is an enlargement, and therefore the fallback position is given less weight because they can't do what they want to do now under the prior approval. That's the thinking behind the the recommendation and why we've taken that view on the principle of the development in this countryside location. Thanks.
I'll just also bring our legal officer in. No, I'm sorry, Councillor Dender. I'll bring our legal officer in. No, I'm sorry, Councillor Dender, please. Thank you. Do you think so? Okay.
It was simply the issue saying that if we refuse tonight and they would go to the fallback, I didn't quite understand. Am I right in saying that if we refuse tonight, they could go to the fallback automatically?
Yeah, that option still exists. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor. I do apologise, Ms. Page, please.
Yeah, not a councillor at the moment. Yeah, I would just add to what Mr. Gregory's already said in respect of that extant prior approval. Obviously, the committee are very aware that the General Permitted Development Order 2015, as its shortened title, I won't reel off the whole thing, gives a grant of planning permission for a number of developments, including changes of use, one of which is the change of use from agricultural use to residential. It's always subject to certain qualifying criteria, conditions, and in Class Q, one of those is the requirement to seek prior approval. The matters that can be looked at in that prior approval are limited, as Mr. Gregory said. You've got transport and highways, noise, contamination, flood risk, location or siting, design and external appearance, and more recently, adequate natural light. And also all permitted development is now required to meet national space standards. But the peculiarity, which I think the speaker pointed out, was at the point of the grant of prior approval for this scheme in 2021, that requirement wasn't in place. It's come in subsequently. So the prior approval that is extant doesn't require the meeting of national space standards. If we were considering it today as a Class Q prior approval, we would be considering whether it met national space standards. The other point to note, Mr. Gregory pointed out, under Class Q, you cannot increase the size of the building. That includes the height. So if you're going to put in insulation, for example, you have to bring down a suspended ceiling and put it within the void rather than adding it on top, because otherwise it falls out with Class Q and you wouldn't meet the definitional requirements. And the other thing to note as well is in terms of the period that it's extant for, you have 3 years to complete, not 3 years to implement like you would with a planning permission. So the conversion would have to be complete by January 2024 as a fallback position. So yes, it provides an alternative if the committee were minded to go with the officer's recommendation tonight to refuse. The applicant can still implement that prior approval, but it is quite limited in scope in terms of what they can do. And I think they've acknowledged that they would like to increase the living space, which is why they're seeking the increase in roof height, the mezzanine, and so on and so forth. So yes, in terms of conversion to a residential use, there is an alternate fallback position for them, but I think they've acknowledged that perhaps it isn't ideal. Hopefully that deals with the question.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll just...
Sorry, can I come back just quickly? The argument in the report on sustainable then, I don't quite understand, because if it's got the Q, it's already been determined that it's sustainable. Or am I misunderstanding again?
Yeah,
because it's already accepted that it will be residential.
Yeah, I'll bring this.
Yeah, I mean, again, it relates to something that that Cheryl's just said. In terms of the Class Q, you can't take into account whether it's in a sustainable location. This is a different proposal to the Class Q application, and therefore you consider it against the development plan, because they can't do what they want to do here under a prior approval. So because of that, you consider it against the development plan, and that's why, I mean, that's why in the report says we consider the fallback position carries less weight it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't say we give it no weight. It says we give it less weight, and therefore we consider how is this related in terms of existing services and facilities. Where is it from the built-up area boundary? Are you going to need the private car to access those services and facilities, etc.? So that's the stance that we've taken.
Thank you. Councillor Marchington, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've listened to both sides of the argument tonight, and I see all the pros and against on both sides. But looking at the plan view there, this is a small building on a large plot amongst a lot of other houses in large plots. This is no expansion into the countryside. This is an expansion of one house in a street that's got houses on both sides. And so I don't see how this can be said it's not sort of additional development to a village scene, because you have some, even villages expand by 1 or 2 people every 10 years. And the logic, that's just an obvious spot. It doesn't affect anyone. It's got the same access to buses or whatever as any other house in that street. So it's not stuck out on its own. So I find it difficult to turn that down against it's already in a current dwelling area, and I think quite a nice dwelling area as well. So, and I don't see it's adverse or doing any damage to alter it. That's just my personal view, and I've listened to both the legal arguments, so I'm not quite sure way to go. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hunt, please.
I can see where the officers are coming from with it, and I think they have got it right with the reasons that they've come up for refusal. But I think just considering things that if it's doesn't represent sustainable development in the location, but because it could be, there could be a dwelling there under the Class Q, my thinking around it is the actual impact that this would have over the, if it was going back to Park Q and somebody living there. You said about it being unsustainable and reliance on the car, but if it is done as has already been approved under community development rights, then someone's going to be living there with a car. So there's not actually going to be any more impact. It's not increasing in such a size that you're having another 3 bedrooms or something. You could have more people living there. So I think for that reason, I would not go as much as saying it's unsustainable, because it hasn't got an additional impact if it is bigger. The floor area that we've got in there, again, that is making it better than what it would be. When this came up last time, I do remember thinking it's actually good to be saving a building rather than just having it dilapidated, sitting there in the middle of a field, not doing anything. So having it being used rather than another house being built is only one building, but it does add to our numbers. So it's good to do that. So it then comes to, I would say, the design of it and how it's going to be looking. It is a bit of a strange design when you look at it, like at the higher roof. This is a bit I can't quite do. Is it a bit strange that actually it makes it quite good? It is one of those design things where you could look and something doesn't quite feel right, but being different makes it right, if that makes sense. And I think that if we can really get sort of the materials which we could condition and make sure that it's a high quality materials that are being used, make sure that it is a passive house standard, I think possibly it's something that we could approve.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer, please.
Yeah, thank you. It's been quite interesting. Again, similar to Councillor Hunt, I think that the officer's report is quite good. And I found that Councillor Martin and Councillor Valentine and Councillor Martington, I think they've summed it up very well. And I'm also, the parish council, the people who are in the village seem to be in favour of this. And I've come down onto the side. I think the applicant stated his case very well. And I think really we should go against the officer's advice tonight. That's my way of thinking at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else indicating. Oh, Councillor Darby.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. One of the things that confused me on this is obviously we're going backwards and forwards between, you know, small building, the big building, so forth, put it in layman's terms. If he went to his fallback position, we'd probably be sitting here in 6 months' time or a year's time when it's built, requiring a large extension put on the side. So I really can't see, you know, us being fair. So I'm afraid I'm probably going to go against the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So members, we take this one to the vote. Those in favour of the officer recommendation for refusal? Those against? And abstentions? Right, of course. Okay, members, so we need to now find. So could we now have a motion on the floor for approval, please? Councillor Martin.
I suppose the proposal would be to grant subject to delegated conditions.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Simmons, thank you.
In terms of conditions that we may impose, and obviously that's something that's delegated, I'd seek members' advice on whether they'd wish to see permitted development rights removed, because this is a small dwelling, and it's exactly the position the councillor said. We could potentially, you know, you don't make decisions on what might happen, but I think it would be wise to remove permitted development rights if you're minded to approve.
Chair, could I come in, please?
Yeah, Mr. Olgar, yeah.
Yeah, we had a similar application at the moment for an alternative scheme, and which has addressed a lot of design issues, and I've put together a list of conditions that would be appropriate for that scheme, and it's very similar to the scheme we have here. So that does include removal of permitted development rights. It also includes a number of other design-related conditions, requiring, for instance, details of samples of the roofing materials to be used, details of the windows to be used, etc., etc. I'm happy to put that up on my screen if that would be helpful to members as an aid memoir. Or
sorry, Mr. Olgar, with respect, I really don't think that's needed. We can delegate authority to officers accordingly, and I'm quite happy and confident in yourself and the officer's ability to implement those. But thank you very much indeed. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks, Chair. That's what I was going to say about the design, making sure there is something in there. The other thing I mentioned last time was about the passive house as well. We can condition to make sure that that is there. But having said that, from what was just said then about another application, can we just have an understanding, is that another application for this same building, same site, or is it something else that?
No, my understanding was a different site, but
no, same site.
It is a same site.
I'll explain a little.
Thank you
about that. It's it's in the history section, first entry. That's it. Yeah. So essentially, we've got an application very recently submitted, which seeks to convert the building into a residential unit. Same as this, but there's no change to the scale. So there's no roof alterations as shown here. What is proposed in that application is that the existing concrete roof is replaced with red clay tiles, and without sort of having assessed the application in full, I mean that aspect of it would be sort of likely beneficial on its own. but we're too early on in the process for me to give a view on that. But that's the application that we've currently got in, and that was submitted fairly recently.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Valentine?
Yeah, on the energy efficiency, I was going to suggest we just put our standard 50% better than 2013 building regs in, which seems consistent with previous decisions. But if they're planning passive house standards, they'll easily exceed that.
Thank you. Councillor Simmons?
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to explain why I couldn't understand the fallback permission, because there was a pending condition consideration application on the list, and that's where I was confused. I think it would have been helpful if that had been made clear prior to this doing what we've done. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, Mr. Gregory?
Yeah, just wanted to clarify this about the whether passive house standard or 50%, whether members have got a sort of particular wish to see one or the other conditions imposed. I think we could have a condition for either. Just didn't know, whether there was a strong view either way.
Yeah, Councillor Hunt?
Thanks. So my view is it should be passive house because of it being in the countryside, and different. If other applications do come forward, something similar, we need to be making sure it's the highest standard as possible. And so passive house, I think it should be.
Members, anybody to the contrary of that? Okay, thank you. Councillor Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just like to confirm on this application we've just decided on that the applicant was going to clay tiles as well.
Yeah, on that drawing, you won't be able to read it. The text is too small.
Yeah.
But on that drawing, it says half-hip roof with red clay tiles.
Yes.
So we'll impose a condition related to those materials. Yeah.
And finally, Councillor Valentine.
Sorry, I just want to come back to the passive house. That we did impose the 50% condition on the rural exception site next door, and I know they couldn't fit air source heat pumps because of the restriction on the electricity network. So we had to back away from that. If it's passive house, it probably won't have a great deal of energy requirement anyway. But my concern, passive house is a specific certification, and there are sometimes limitations on it. So I wonder whether we should just say passive house or equivalent in the equivalent standard, because it's like the BREEAM standard.
Yes, of course.
Sometimes
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
you know, have
Thank you.
reasons why
Councillor
they
Hunt, are you
can't.
happy for that? And of course, Mr. Gregory, is that something we could do?
I would I would have said if it's passive house or similar, or whatever the wording was there, it's passive house or it's passive house. I don't know what there would be that would be similar, but I personally still would think that it has to be that standard or nothing. If it's not achievable, then you can't do it.
My concern with having the word in passive house or sorry, I can't remember the precise term you used. Yeah, in that one of the tests for a condition is that it has to be precise, and if we sort of don't have a precise wording in there, then I'm concerned that it wouldn't meet the test for a condition.
We often say BREEAM or equivalent on non-residential buildings.
Right, noted.
Councillor Marchington.
Can't we delegate that to officers to?
I did say that right at the outset, but thank you for that anyway. I'm glad you were awake at the time. Thank you. So members, we'll take this one to the vote then. Those in favour? Those against? And abstentions? So that's 14 for, 1 against. So permission will be granted subject to the issue of decision notice and relevant conditions as agreed by the officer. Thank you very much, members. Members, we now come on to item 2.3, which is 21/506465 hybrid. And this is land at Lady Dane Farm, Love Lane, Faversham. I thank the officer for an outline and any updates, please.
Excuse me, Chair. Can we give our councillor back?
Oh, I don't know what. No, he wasn't out for that one. I don't know why he left the room. He's had to give his apologies and leave, unfortunately. Yeah, I thought because he left before the last one, so it was this one that he would have been having speaking on and excused himself. So, thank you, your officer. I do apologise.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Chair. There are a couple of items I should draw attention to. One, I believe everyone had received on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken, and that's the representation from the Faversham Society, which came in late last week. So we've circulated that. The applicants made a response to the latest submission by the Faversham Society, and that's tabled tonight. So I hope everybody's got a copy of that. There's a couple of corrections I want to add as an update to the report, which is to the affordable housing breakdown under paragraph 9.96. The 31 flats under that paragraph should read 16 one-bed flats and 15 times two-bed flats. So the culprit's the number 17, which shouldn't be there. So apologies for that, Chair. We have also picked up that and agreed with the applicant to make an extra contribution as requested by KCC Public Rights of Way Officer for £10,000 for improvements to adjoining public rights of way connecting to ZF 28, which runs across the site. So that's been agreed. We're still trashing out the monitoring fees with them. So those are the changes to the report, but just as a background, this actual application is with Planning Inspectorate on appeal. We have a sister application which is completely identical, and that's listed under the planning history 23/500/857/hybrid. So that's the sister application. They've twin tracked it essentially. And we've got dates coming up for the PINS public inquiry, which is due in June. So we've got deadlines coming up. This is as described by, this is a putative report in the sense that we're presenting it to members with our assessment, what we would have done had we been able to make a determination before the appeal was submitted. So it would be the council's decision as recommended. The hybrid application consists of a full element for 84 residential units and 3 commercial units comprising essentially retail units. Now, if I can just bring up the I'll run through the scheme quickly so that you all have an understanding of exactly what it is. As you know, this is the site which is part of the MU6 allocation in the local plan. It runs to the east of Love Lane, opposite Windermere, and to the south of King's Drive, which is the Crest Nicholson development to the north within the allocated site. In terms of the aerial view, the boundary would run essentially where the cursor is running at the moment. So apologies, I think had sufficient time to do the red line boundary on the overhead satellite image. But to explain to you exactly what it is, just bear with me a second. Okay, so this is the master plan layout, and the applicant has made it clear so that it can be seen exactly what is proposed. Now the full element encompasses the housing proposals for the 85 units, 84, I beg your pardon, which includes 2 blocks of flats on the Love Lane frontage, and that's where the retail units will be on the ground floor, set within a parking forecourt. The rest of the units will be all houses with rear gardens, and I'm running the cursor along the line of the full element, which includes the Spinal Road as well. But it doesn't include the day nursery, which is outline only. So the boundary skirts around the day nursery. The care home element is part of the outline, and the E-class employment element, essentially it will be the former B1 use class. And the total employment floor space, including the retail, amounts to 11,861 as set out under 2.8 of the report. So that's the residential full permission element of the hybrid. The area to the north is retained as part of the original outline, which is now expired. But it retains the green spaces, the playgrounds, the swales for the drainage, a small orchard, and football pitches as well. And that's part of the outline, as stated there. So you can see clearly what that element is. And I mentioned earlier about ZF28, which runs across the belly of the scheme, if you like, and that is to be widened. The prior officer has requested that to 3 meters, and that's agreed. So essentially, it is a mixed hybrid with the outline element primarily consisting of the employment space, the care home, and the residue of the residential, which is 70 units to the southeast of the site. And the site borders the railway line, as I'm sure you'll know. So just moving across to the aerial drone shot, that basically identifies where the line of the public right-of-way is. This is Love Lane. This is the new development, the Crest Nicholson development to the north at King's Drive. There was local concern expressed about loss of hedging along the Love Lane frontage. But I'll show you some more aerial shots later, and you can see for yourself that a lot of it will be retained as confirmed in the report. So that's essentially what it is, Chair. That's the scheme. A design and form of what is essentially an urban extension to Faversham within the MU6 allocation can be seen from these images, which shows the scale and form and variation in materials and treatment. And this is block A and B that I mentioned earlier, with the retail elements fronting Love Lane. That's the existing recess bay along Love Lane where the bus stop is. There's some more images that convey to you this is the view from the northeast of the site, looking down across the open spaces to the north and the playing fields, with blocks A and B over in this location. So the employment outline element is down by the railway line down there. And this is another view, which is a closer view of the two blocks as part of the full element. And again, showing you the scale of and form of the design of the houses, which will sit around the open space, which is part of the outline. There's the play area that I pinpointed earlier. So if we can move forward, this is another view across the scheme, and again showing the architecture of the scheme and the mix of materials, roofing materials, as well as facing materials. All of these will be subject to details for approval as conditioned. There's 45 conditions set out at the end of the report. Now, this is the view from the north east of the site, looking down across the area where one would see the sports pitches, for instance, opposite King's Drive over here. This area immediately adjacent is subject to a separate planning application by Crest Nicholson for 88 dwellings, and that's pending. Another view looking down towards the completed scheme, occupied scheme of King's Drive here, with their main access onto Love Lane. And this is the view I mentioned earlier, where the bus stop is over here opposite Windermere. And that shows that a lot of the boundary is devoid of any mature hedging. But where there is hedging, that will be retained. And for some reason, that stuck in my mind because I've read so many letters from local residents, a lot of whom were quite concerned about the loss of the habitat, particularly to wildlife. And this is the final view, really. Now, the report has been, the scheme has been assessed. It was amended in December in response to the first round of consultation in early 2022. So the amendments have been reconsulted upon. There are no objections from statutory consultees as such. Obviously, there are concerns, and they're summarised in the reports, concerns from local residents, as well as Faversham Town Council, which is reproduced in full in Appendix 1 and 2. As I said, the Faversham Society's comments, the detailed comments that came in late last week, is addressed by the applicant in the tabled paper. And the last image is that one that I've just had. So essentially, Chair, we are recommending that had the council been in a position to determine this application, we would have recommended approval. And the executive summary sets out the merits of the case, the balancing exercise, the court precedent, for instance, and our five-year housing land supply position. So the tilted balance is engaged. And for that reason, we consider that on the balance of all material considerations, the scheme should be supported, and we recommend approval subject to Section 106 details on all the infrastructure contributions, as well as the conditions, as I mentioned earlier, 45 of them, addressing all the relevant issues from drainage to contamination to ecology, energy, etc. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much indeed. Members, just before I move the officer recommendation, again, just that awareness that we aren't determining the application this evening. It's not within our gift. But what we are doing is deciding on how we would have determined it had we had the opportunity of doing so. So I now move the officer recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Jays. And members, open to the floor. Councillor Martin, please.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, MU6, everyone's favourite site. 45 conditions. Yes, 45 conditions is wonderful. I remember when we last had an application on this particular site, the Crest Nicholson scheme, that had quite a few conditions. I think it was well in excess of 45. Some of those conditions included the requirement that the sports pitches be provided before the occupation of the 84th dwelling. There's no sports pitches because they're in this application as well as the last one and the one before that. The traffic light controls of Love Lane and the A2 would be completed before the occupation of the 100th dwelling. Haven't got those either yet. Funnily enough, we set some really great conditions and then we don't seem to get them. KCC said early on in the application this time round that they shouldn't have any occupations of the dwellings on this if it was approved prior to that junction being upgraded. They backtracked. It's really difficult to see, well, it's very easy to see why local residents get up in arms when we're not applying the conditions that we've had on previous. It seems to be on this particular site, we've gone piecemeal all the way through. We've given up an inch here, we've given up an inch there. And now we've got what was essentially 90% of the employment allocation in Faversham now being put forward for residential. So the whole idea of us not having dormitory towns, we'll give that out the window to get our 5-year land supply back. Thank you very much. I'm sorry, we set a policy for a reason on this site. It was in the local plan. It was set for employment space. We're now saying that we're going to go against that and go for residential instead. I'm no NIMBY. No one could ever accuse me of it. I've sat in this chamber God knows how many times and said 35% affordable housing, yes, please. And I would probably be doing that on this if I thought the design was good enough and if I thought that we were going to get the sports pitches that will be in the condition and if I thought they were actually going to go ahead with the outline phase at a future date. But I don't believe it because I think, again, we will lose that outline employment land in the future to another application saying, I can't get anyone to take these units on. Let me have residential instead. Thank you very much. It's really difficult. And as I say, one hand of me is going, I want that 35% affordable dwellings. I want that retail space in that area because we don't have it in that part of my ward. But the other part of me is going, are we really going to get what we're promised? And I don't think we would do. I think the town council made some very good representations. I don't like the design in general of the buildings that have been put forward. I don't think they're in keeping with this particular part of Faversham. I think the developer has completely ignored the emerging neighbourhood plan that the town council and community have been working on. I think they've paid lip service to consultation so far. And overall, I'd say I'm not particularly keen. But by the same token, if people in this room can persuade me, I can still be persuaded. It's very tricky, as I say, and it is disappointing that they couldn't wait to get to the Secretary of State and the Planning Inspectorate rather than letting us have an opportunity to debate this properly.
Thank you. And I will just say, obviously, of course, as in every occasion, we can only really determine, if we had the opportunity to determine it, what's in front of us this evening. And so I empathise exactly with what you're saying, but we're invariably faced with that. Councillor Hunt, please.
Thanks. I understand the sort of issues that's been raised there, but I think the reality is we haven't got any control over it. It is going to appeal. Just to say that it's a shame that they're going to appeal. I know this is a 2021 planning application. This has been around for a long time, and it's no wonder the applicant's going to appeal for non-determination. You need to start getting moving with some of these, and when it is, especially seen in the past with SME builders, they need to be building houses. They can't just be sitting around for so long, and it's no wonder that they do go for appeal and put in other applications to try and move things along a bit. We're not going to be making the decision. It is going to be the planning inspectorate, which is a shame. We haven't got a 5-year housing supply. The local plan is out of date. These sorts of things, we could be resisting it if we were in a bit more control, and we're not. So I think the officers have got it right. We have got the tilted balance that applies, and unfortunately, I think it is right that it does need to be approved. I think it goes to appeal. It will be one appeal. It's better for us to limit that and say that we would have approved it. And if the other application comes through at a time and saves us going to an appeal, if we've made the decision to approve it, then that saves everyone a lot of time and probably a lot of money as well. So I think it's the right decision.
Thank you. I'm just going to bring our head of planning in.
I think it's also worth reminding members that when it goes to appeal, it's up to the inspector to impose conditions. We'll be asked what conditions we might like to see imposed. But it is up to the inspector to impose conditions, and inspectors do impose conditions of their own volition, which we have little control over.
Councillor Winkles, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is a difficult one for me. I've listened to the previous speakers and they put very valid arguments. But one thing that I am impressed with, to a point, the 35% affordable housing. There again, the 35% affordable housing is on the market value of an area, basically. So what is affordable housing? So that does seem partially attractive to go with this, but I'll listen to the debate further before I make mine up. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davey, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a bit of clarification, it may be on the legalese side of it. Because this is a putative decision in effect, in the conditions, there's nothing around limiting working hours. Is that a general thing? And also, I can't seem to find anything apart from the quality, the BREEAM quality of the Class E buildings. Is the developer proposing to build all of the commercial units and the care home, or just providing land? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, members, just for everybody's attention, condition 19. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you,
Councillor Simmons, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. I really, really regret this application. I have a lot of sympathy with what Councillor Martin said at the start of the debate. The problem is that it's an allocated site within the local plan, and it doesn't matter how critical you are of the local plan. It is allocated within the current local plan, and we're very difficult for us to go against something which is in the local plan. So I can't see that we've got much alternative but to approve it.
Thank you. Councillor Davey, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Once again, apologies for missing that. The other question was regarding the care home and the commercial units. Are they proposing to build them or just provide the land? Again, I may have missed it, but I'd just like to find out.
Thank you, Councillor Davey. As I understand it, Fernham Homes are working with a care home provider because the detailed design will be subject to the care home provider's specific requirements. So it won't be, not necessarily Fernham Home will build it. It will be, as I understand it, be the care home provider. I have got a name somewhere, but I can supply that if you wish.
David, do you want to come back?
Yeah, no, that won't be necessary. Thank you. I was just thinking of like Great East Hall. If someone decides that there's it's no longer viable, what will happen to the land then? Will that just be turned over to more housing? Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, I should emphasise that the care home element is in the outline part of the proposal. So when the details come in as reserved matters, eventually, not this particular one, because obviously it's with pins, but if we determine the sister application and we reserve those matters for further approval, that will provide the detail that we require, including the employment element to the south, which is currently part of the outline element. Does that answer your question?
Thank you. Partially. No, my concern was that, like with Great East Hall, if it's considered at a later date to not be viable, if the care home provider says, it's not going to work there, is the land likely to be turned over to housing, or it would just lie fallow like Great East Hall? Thank you.
I'm afraid I can't answer that question because it's speculating on what's going to happen in the future. But I'm assuming that there's a market for care homes, and they are in discussions with a care home provider who's on board. So we would, it would be reasonable for us to expect, as part of the application proposal, that the care home will come forward. It's an aging population, so there's a need for a care home. I didn't mean that as a slight. Thank you.
Okay, members, I don't see anybody else indicating. So those in favour of the officer recommendation? Those against? Abstentions? That's 14 for, 1 against and 1 abstention. So we determined that had we had the opportunity, that we would have granted permission on that one. Okay, members. Thank you very much indeed. We now move on to finally part 5s. And I'll put that out there for any general comments. Oh, sorry, apologies.
Chair, now that the committee has decided to support the officer's recommendation, could we respectfully request that the sister application be dealt with under Chief Officer's delegated authority, because all the matters that are relevant to this proposal, which is identical to the sister application, has been considered and determined for the purposes of the PINS representation from the council, simply because we do have specific deadlines to meet for PINS, and obviously it's critical that we determine the sister identical application on the same basis as we have considered tonight.
Okay, Councillor Hunt, please.
I think doing that is going to save everyone a lot of time and money, and it's the best thing to do. If that was to come forward to us, we're not going to be refusing it because we've just said that we would have approved that. So it's been much better just to do that.
Thank you. Members, any further comments? I'll have myself with those comments, certainly. Councillor Hunt.
Chair, just to be clear, that's application 23/500/857/hybrid that we will determine under your authority delegated to the Chief Officer. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Members, so those in favour of that? It's unanimous. Thank you, members. So thank you very much indeed. Thanks for your...
Thank you, Chair.
I'll let you scoot off back to the city. Thank you very much. So part 5, members, I'll throw that up for any general comments. General Simmons, sorry, Councillor Simmons.
Thank you. Thank you, Sergeant Gibson. Well, I'm pleased about the decision about the masts in the central car park in Faversham. Well, whilst we all like to use our mobile phones, I'm astonished that they've not been able to find a more suitable site for it. It does look most unappealing. Not necessarily the mast, but the black hoarding around it looked rather unappealing. So that was 5.1. I wanted to say something about 5.3 as well, if I may, Chairman. And my thanks to officers for the appeal. It was a very lengthy appeal, and the inspector was very thorough, and he really did go through the details in a lot of effort. I think it's a good decision, both in that particular location, which is in the AONB, and is also on a lane with other similar sites. And I thought it was very interesting that right at the end of his report, he specified, and he did say that it's rarely justifiable to grant a second temporary planning permission. And I think that's quite important for us as a council, where we've been pushed into a position where we have had to give temporary permissions, that there is some defence there against constant temporary permission after temporary permission. I mean, there is a caveat in that, obviously, instead of being a temporary permission, it can be a permanent decision. So there is a degree of risk there. But I think it's an important point that the inspector was making. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Again, it was purely welcoming the decision on 5.1. Like Councillor Simmons, I think that black hoarding is not just hideous, it's downright dangerous in the middle of a car park next to our EV charge points. Someone backing out of those can barely see anybody coming around the corner from the other parking bays. I look forward to them finding alternative locations, perhaps that help subsidise one of our well-known sports institutions in town on top of the roof.
Thank you. So, members, Chairman's prerogative. I get the last chance to speak, and I'd just like to thank two members who will definitely be no longer with us when we come back, and that's Councillor Ken Rolls, who's been a member of the committee, and Councillor Tim Valentine. Again, he'll be with us. So, thanks for your input and thanks for your support and some debate. Of equal importance, sitting to my left is Flo Churchill, and it'll be her last planning committee as our interim head of planning. And I'd like to thank Flo for her wise counsel and support throughout that. It may well be my last one in the chair, and you're probably all saying thank goodness for that. But I've got to say it has been an enjoyable 4 years. Where it's gone, I just don't know. And thank you to my Deputy Vice Chairman, Elliot Jers, who stepped in quite often at short notice whilst I've been on the trip to London hospitals supporting a local resident. But thank you all very much indeed. It really has been appreciated, and I think we have done some good work and we've had some good debates. And whilst we don't always agree, that's what the planning committee is all about. Thank you all very much indeed. Wish you all a safe journey home, and may see some of you next time. Thank you very much. Who knows? Thank you.